What's up everyone? In this video, I wanted to title it The Truth About Gold Diggers. So lately on YouTube and on the internet, there's been a ton of these gold digger prank videos and they're huge. For the YouTube community at least. When I go to the general public, it's very surprising, but 99% of people haven't seen them. It's kind of weird how that works. They get tens of millions of views on YouTube, but then the general public, they don't, it's still tiny compared to how many people are in there in the actual world. The point is, I wanted to shed some truth on what the actual dynamics of the world are in terms of gold diggers. Now, you might be wondering, well, what do you know about this? Why should I trust you? Well, one of my hobbies is I love listening to interviews and podcasts of successful people. And some of these are like success and self-help podcasts. Others are just straight up interviews that are really long sometimes. And I've probably watched over 1,000 from millionaires, billionaires, and all sorts of people in between. So you tend to pick up on a lot of stories while doing this. And I just wanted to give you just a general theme on what the dynamic is. And so if you don't know what the gold digger pranks are in the first place, they're very well known on YouTube. And the basic idea behind them is they basically rent a very expensive car, and then first they go to a girl on the street that's very attractive and they're like, hey, do you want to hang out? And of course they get rejected. After that, in comes the super expensive car, and then they find out, oh, this guy's rich, and all of a sudden the girl flips around. So there's a few interesting things to know about these pranks in the first place. There's some truth and some not so truth in it. Are there gold diggers in the world? For sure. Are there superficial, horrible people? For sure. But at the same time, there is a bit of fishing going on. What I mean by that is they're kind of bait and switching, in the sense that they're kind of doing this over and over again until they find that girl that is the exact fit, and that's the video that they will upload. So that might be the one winner out of 10 or 20 or 50 attempts, where it's a really attractive girl and she falls into the stereotype perfectly, which is why it kind of goes viral. So unfortunately, there is a bit of manufacturing there. So you have to realize it's somewhat fake. Having said that though, of course there's superficial people in the world. I've run into them. They're horrible people. And I think they're not just girls, there's guys too, like guys who won't be your friend unless you're super famous or successful. And those aren't really friends you want to hang around anyways. But that's a lesson that some people have to learn the hard way. And yes, there are plenty of cities, I've heard LA is one of them, that are very, very superficial in a lot of ways. Many of the girls are attracted to that sort of thing, and the guys are attracted to a certain type of girl. And because of that Hollywood type setting, it kind of feeds on itself to be more and more like this. Having said that though, there's also a lot of truth that there are good people in the world. I mean, with 7 billion people and growing, of course you have all sorts of variants in the world. Again, I'm not saying I'm an expert or I know everything about this, but one thing I have heard a lot is people from all sorts of cities and countries saying, oh, our place is getting more and more superficial. China's getting so superficial nowadays. All they care about is people with money and status. And, for me, I have also heard the flip side to that, which is that I've seen doctors, female doctors, who have chosen to marry people who aren't rich or wealthy, who have just normal white collar or blue collar working jobs. And this sort of stuff happens. And you have occasionally I've seen very attractive girls who marry or date men who are not making millions of dollars. And this is very surprising for maybe you. It was for me in certain ways, but I think it's one of those things where it kind of makes sense. You know, it wasn't that surprising because it kind of made sense. You know, there are people that are good. Not everyone is like this. So this ties into the lesson that goes with all my videos, which is that, of course, you want to be honest, ethical. You want to listen to the golden rule, which is do be very polite and nice to everyone, and just do your best to be friendly, and don't trick or lie or cheat or steal. Now it seems so obvious, but at the same time, there's hundreds of millions of people who don't follow this, who lie and cheat and steal every time they have. I mean, I hear all these stories these days uh, of stuff like this happening, businesses getting scammed and going bankrupt because of this. So it's very important to just find some people that you can trust, that you can rely on. As far as gold diggers go, you know, it's actually one of those things where it's a good thing in certain ways if you're not rich, or at least it's a good thing to maybe hide it or screen for it. You know, some people, especially poor people, they will complain and they'll say, "Oh, I wish I was super rich." But then at the same time, it's kind of like, well, if you were, you definitely attract a crowd that you may not want, and on top of that, you know, it's sometimes better to just dress and appear like you aren't like that. So it's a weird thing, and I think one piece of advice, if you are rich, is to just maybe dress down a bit, because you will run into those situations, whether it's a networking event or a just a social gathering, where, you know, especially depending on what it is, you can run into guys and girls who are just horrible people and are just people pleasers to you, but then are not. And a great way to screen for that is simply just dressing normal or maybe just slightly above average, not flamboyantly rich. And by doing that, you can really single it out. And that is actually what happens a lot of the times. And I'm sure I've gotten instances when I try and introduce to myself, I definitely have, to guys and girls, and they were total dicks. But if I was dressed super well and it was clear that I was like the king of the party, they probably wouldn't have done that. So again, it's a good screen. And of course, there are pros and cons to having that social proof, but use it for the right reasons. If you're looking for a long-term relationship, that's one of those instances where maybe you don't want to dress flamboyantly and you don't want to come into a room where everyone knows your name. There are other instances where you're just trying to progress your career or whatever else, where that might be of use. So just keep it, again, the same. The theme is honesty, ethics, all that good stuff. And of course, you know, just there is good people out there. And of course, you may want to consider the city you live or the places you go to look for that sort of stuff. And maybe the way you dress too. And that may just mean not being too flamboyant. I think it's very interesting because there are people who they dress super flamboyantly, and they kind of they love to show off their watch and all sorts of stuff. And the funny thing is, these are people who are not even that rich. Like maybe they make, if they're lucky, they make like six figures or $500,000, and they're not even that rich, and they love to show off, because they want to attract the superficial people, and they know they're not that rich, so they're trying to attract the gold diggers, and so they wear the most cheesiest, flamboyant watches and all sorts of other stuff. I mean, don't be like that, you know. There are actually, it's funny because the most expensive watches are oftentimes not the most flamboyant. Like there are watches that cost $80,000, and they look just like normal casual watches. I mean, of course, if you look at the intricacies of it, it's very detailed and stuff, but it's definitely not like those Gucci diamond encrusted watches that are gold and flamboyant. Those are to attract the suckers who want to appear wealthy. And yeah, sometimes girls fall for it. So what's the point of this whole story? Again, one last time, honest, ethics, and of course, in certain situations, you want to screen for people who aren't gold diggers by just dressing normal, and then the last thing, of course, is that there are good people out there. Believe it or not, there are bad people as well, but there are also good people, and you can definitely find them by just doing your homework. Of course, these are just theories and are subject to change in the future. Of course, I'm not a complete expert at all of this, but I do have a very broad knowledge on this, and that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.